Hello everybody, this is Maniac4Bricks, and welcome to the LEGO Creator Mighty Dinosaurs set from 2017. This is set number 31058. It has 174 pieces, ages 7 to 12. This is a 3-in-1 set, which allows you to build one at a time different LEGO dinosaurs with the same pieces. So, also I'd like to mention that this is a $15 US price for the set. So, actually pretty good for price per piece. We're going to look at all three models in this set, starting from the smallest and simplest to build and up to the big man himself, the Tyrannosaurus Rex. So stay tuned as we look at all the different things this set has to offer. So here is a look at the smallest of the three builds. This is the pterodactyl, or Pteranodon, as you may. So this one is actually a pretty easy one to put together. You mostly started with the main body, work with the legs, then make the arms, and then the head. A lot of it is done in a symmetrical build, so if you wanted to do it at the same time, it is possible, and you'll have an easier time with building it. I know for a couple of pieces here and there, they were also done at the same time. For example, these two sections on the wings were done as exactly the same build because they're symmetrical in two different directions. This was actually a pretty cool model to put together, and I like how many different ball joints it has for functions. For example, you can actually take the wings and position them to a lot of different poses, so you can get some different areas of flight out of the pterodactyl. You can also move the head around in a couple of different places, and the legs can also move likewise. They have some nice claws on the backs of them, and you can sort of stand this up as if it were just landing, but it doesn't really look that great on the underside. It mostly has just this tan structure to it. So, it looks pretty nice for a starter model, and it has a lot of good points for articulation. You can even move the wings tilting in different directions to really get some different feel for it. Then you also have the tail back here if you want to help with some stability. As we can see, kind of needs that. So let me just fix that again. And there we are, back up on its feet. Before we move further with the review, I'd like to take a moment to recognize these parts. These seem new to me personally, and there are two recolors, dark tan and dark green. Two of each appear in this set. This seems to be a new piece to my eyes, and only appears once in this creator set. And the last one, you can kind of see from the other side, it has two studs on the outer side of it. This appears 4 times in tan in this creator set. Interesting parts that'll be great to use later on. Up next, we'll take a look at this Stegosaurus build. Relatively, compared to the Pteranodon that we just looked at, it's not too much more advanced in terms of how many pieces are used or different building techniques. It's kind of hard to judge whether this one is the smallest build or the Pteranodon was, but looking at the page numbers, it seemed like this was the second of the most pages that it took, and not necessarily counting the number of steps. It does have some really nice design to it, albeit it doesn't really have a lot of play features. For this one, you still have a lot of the ball joints that are at least 2 in the legs, or 2 in the tail, and then you have 1 in each of the legs. So you can actually get a few walking poses if you just balance out the legs nicely and, make a little bit of motion. However, the front legs are a little bit more limited than the back ones. As you can see, the pieces that are used for holding the ball joints are much more fixed in the front. They are the same pieces that are used for the kind of like the wing area of the Pteranodon, and the back ones are a lot more free and open, also going along with the slopes that are surrounding it. You also have a bit of articulation in the head as well, so you can have the ball joint moving around quite a bit, and you could also move this a little bit to the back, although it's not really intended to be moving about because it's part of its head. I really do like the design for the head itself. It has some nice shapes that are used with those different wedge plates and even some of the slopes. I also like how the horns are extended on it and have little bits on the ends as well. This has a pretty good use of different pieces. The only thing I would say is a little bit faulty is this area in the middle where it just doesn't quite make sense. But it's still a nice model to put together. So now we have the final model. This is the main model of the set, the Tyrannosaurus Rex. I gotta say, I like the combination of pieces that were done throughout the set with the tan, green, and dark gray well, yeah, dark gray, but also light gray and dark green. Because it just meshes together in the right spots just enough so that the gray and light gray don't really get in the way of all the other colors. So, moving on with this particular model, it has a small thing in the back which you could probably build for most of the other models, with the exception of the Stegosaurus because of some of these horn-like pieces. But it's intended to be some sort of bones, maybe a woolly mammoth or something that was in the same time period. So anyways, looking at this model, it actually has a couple points of articulation, mostly doing with the ball joints again, and a little bit doing with some hinges. The thing that is a little bit deterring about this is the hinges and ball joints are not always in the best spots, but they're still enough to get some neat poses. For example, the tail is made out of 3 different ball joints, actually 2 ball joints and 1 hinge joint at the end. And that's just enough for you to move the tail around and get some nice poses with it and get it in some sort of moving motion while it's walking. Speaking of walking, the leg articulation is not quite going to help with that because you have articulation here in the ball joint, here in a ball joint, but not in this knee region. That's built up as one piece, or one assembly, I should say, so you don't really have a lot of areas to move it just to base it on that. If we just move this out of the way, you could kind of get some poses like this where maybe it's stalking, but you do have to balance everything, and it may not work out the best way in every scenario. Point being proven. Aside from that flaw, you can still use the leg articulation to create some interesting poses if you keep the feet in the same area. If you just move it up and down, you can create some creeping poses, or maybe the Tyrannosaurus Rex is looking up at something, like in this pose. Now moving on to the arms, we have 2 simple joints that are both a ball joint and a hinge joint. You can't really move these in order to get both of the claws facing forward and out like that. Instead, they'll swipe from side to side. But you can still move them about and create some interesting looks for it. But the most you're going to get with both of the claws being forward on each hand is kind of in a diagonal form on the sides. Now moving on to the head, we have the first neck joint, which is a double locked hinge joint. And on top of that, we have a small ball joint, which is right behind the head area. The head is actually a pretty good construction, but I'll talk about more of that in just a moment. The double hinge joint works very well here to create some interesting poses and keep it locked in place. Albeit some of them may be a little bit unrealistic, but you still have that luxury for posability. The ball joint head, of course, you get a lot of flexibility out of that, but still create some wandering poses here and there to make it move around. You can't really move the head much down from that point though. Now moving on to the head itself, just move this out of the way, you actually do have some interesting pieces that are used mostly in the mouth area that none of the other models seem to use. For example, there's a bar piece in here. This takes advantage of the clips on the clip pieces where other ones just kind of hide it away in other parts of the model. You also have actually there were 3 of the dark tan pieces. I mistaked about that earlier. There are also more tan slopes and tiles that are put along the sides, and also a mouth kind of area in the middle between the teeth that is illustrated by this dark tan piece. This is actually a pretty good display for the mouth on a smaller scale dinosaur. I kind of think back to the ones that were from early 2000s when I think of this mouth, and this is just fantastic to build on a smaller scale. There's also, speaking of scales, not really, speaking of other pieces that are not used in other areas, this little piece on the gray is actually not used in other areas of the set. This is the only model that uses that for this middle toe on both of the legs. And it does create some articulation if you wanted it, but I don't think it's really that necessary. This is also pretty nice to just have around as a nice posable model, and you could really move the tail out a bit and get some nice ferocious poses with this dinosaur. It's definitely not the largest of the dinosaur models LEGO has made in sets, but for a smaller price range and a smaller age range, this is a fun one to put together. So overall, for a $15 LEGO Creator set, this is actually pretty good. I really like how all the models came together. They are smaller sizes compared to previous LEGO Creator dinosaurs, but I think it's a lot easier to build and a lot more fun to play around with. You have a good amount of posability with different articulations, albeit some of them a little harder to pose with and not entirely flexible, but still an enjoyable experience for a smaller LEGO set. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think about this set. Obviously, these two figures aren't included with it. They're from the Jurassic World series. If you'd like to see more dinosaur reviews and LEGO sets being talked about, you can click the link in the description below for my LEGO Dinosaur playlist, which has a various amount of themes that have to do with LEGO dinosaurs, including Jurassic World, Dino Attack, or even LEGO Creator like you see here. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time with more LEGO videos. And you can also check out other LEGO Creator sets that I've done on the channel. Just check in the description below for more details. We'll see you next time with more LEGO videos, and have a great day.